Hello, my name is Noelle Kinney, and I am president of the Cranberry Arts Council. We are so happy to be able to present our Art Inspiration series featuring 9 different workshops led by 3 incredibly talented local artists. Grant funding for this program has been provided by the Middlesex County Board of Chosen Freeholders through a grant award from the Middlesex County Cultural and Arts Trust Fund. The Cranberry Arts Council is very proud and thankful to have been awarded this valuable grant for our community. We are thrilled to have artist Tamara Woronczuk with us today. Tamara is a retired art teacher with 40 years of experience in New Jersey schools. She is a graduate of Glassboro State College and holds a master's degree from NYU. Tamara works primarily in acrylic and mixed media, focusing on developing beautiful textural surfaces and integrating pleasing color schemes. Tamara's award-winning work has been shown throughout New Jersey, and she is a trustee of the Ocean County Artists Guild. Today's workshop is Creative Gelli Plate Exploration, and be sure to check out Tamara's other workshops in our series. And now here is Tamara.
Hello, and welcome to the first workshop, and I do hope you'll join us for the next 2. Today we're going to explore Gelli Plate, which has become quite a phenomenon in the mixed media community, so to speak. It's a lot of fun to work with, and it really allows you to kind of relax, explore, and have fun. As Noelle has just said, my Cranberry is my own stomping grounds. I was teaching there for 31 years before I retired, and I retired to the Toms River area. And I'm very active in the Ocean County Artists Guild, where if you're in the area, I'd love to have you visit and see my work. Mixed media, or the process that we're going to start today, begins with this item, which is a Gelli plate. It doesn't look like this when it's new. It looks like this when it's new. But this is a much used, much loved piece of material, and it has accumulated many colors over the course of the time I have used it. It's a unique plastic containing mineral oil, and so it's squishy, it's soft, but it has to be, you have to be careful with it. You can't leave it on an absorbent surface. If you leave it on a piece of newspaper, you will have the news printed onto that surface and you will not be able to get rid of it. Today what we're going to do is we're going to use acrylic paints. We're going to use a variety of craft paints, which are more liquid. You can use acrylic paints out of the tube, but they're a little bit thicker. So I would advise starting with the craft paints and starting with a variety of colors. Up here I have set up reds, oranges, yellows, blues, greens, and purples. I try to keep them separated like that so I can kind of grab and go as we go along. The first thing we're going to do this morning is to do a series of what are called mono prints, because we're going to pull one. However, after we're done with one, we're going to let them dry, and then we're going to print over them, and then we're going to print over them again. The wonderful thing about this process is you cannot make a mistake. If you don't like what you've printed, you just simply redo it. I mean, you can trash it, but there's no point in doing that. You have a color surface to work on, and you can keep working on and on and on and on. I'm going to show you a very small thing that I did for the purposes of this demo, just to give you some direction. I usually have my concept, my idea in my head, or even on a canvas board, which is the surface that I use. Canvas is too giving. Canvas board is a harder surface, and you apply a lot of glue in this process at the end, so the board is somewhat better. If you have in mind, what you're going to be making, this is a very simple collage. It's called the March of the Kiwis, and it's made out of all painted paper, painted and stamped and decorated paper. The background is torn, the kiwis are cut, the grass below is cut as well. Very hard to tear little thin strips of this sort. But anyway, if you have an idea in mind, if you want to do a landscape, you know you're going to need blues and whites perhaps for the sky. If it's going to be a sunset, you're going to need reds, yellows, pinks, oranges. If you're going to do trees, you will need series of greens. So as you're printing, keep that in mind. I usually work in color groups. Earlier, I made a series of single prints. They don't look like much of anything. I did a yellow and white. I did, and I'm not cleaning this plate in between. I did turquoises and greens, whites, greens, yellows, and this is all one print. This is all one surface print. I am going to use these later to print on again. But while these are sitting here, I'm going to do another color series to show you how this process works. What you're going to need is something to cover your table surface with. I usually don't recommend newspaper because of the fact that the print will come off on your hands and it may get onto the jelly plate. This is just plain newsprint. Anything, you know, clean, clear, and simple will do. I have my jelly plate and I have a roller. It's actually, the correct name is a brayer. I do have them in 2 different sizes. And this is what you use to put your ink on the table, on the surface. So now I did yellows and blues. Let's try some reds and give them a good shake before you use them. And I usually don't use one color. It's kind of more fun to sprinkle a few different colors on there. Not too much because you don't want it skewing over the ends of the plate. I also, when I remember, I store the paints upside down so they come out a little more quickly. And again, I want to remind you that you need to be having fun when you're doing this. This is not a process of nitpicking at a little tiny detail. This is a broad, fun activity. So now you can see I've got, or at least I hope you can see, I'm going to hold that up. The way the colors have come out, I have some red, I have some orange, I have some yellow. Now, one of the things that I have been doing for a long time is I have been using recycled paper for my projects. So I have here some sheets from the phone book, some sheets from my Medicaid booklet, some sheets from an old children's book, and some music. You can use anything except the paper should never be glossy. If it's glossy, the ink will slide around and you will not get the kind of surface that you want. So now that I have this, I'm going to take a sheet of the phone book, just put it on and press it with my hands, working from the middle to the outside so that I don't get any air bubbles underneath there because you may end up having white spots in there. And then I just very carefully pull my sheet. And yes, you can see the print underneath, and that's fine. I'm just going to lay this one aside. And then I still have red, yellow, and green on here. Well, I'm not cleaning the jelly plate. Now I think I'll throw a touch of white in there because the white won't destroy the colors that are already on the surface. So let's put a little bit of white in there. Roll it again. See what we get. Of course, we're getting lighter shades. It's always good to have, as you're working, have some light shades, some medium shades, and some darker ones. You don't want to get to the end and have your project have all the same darkness or the same value of color. Here's a sheet of music. This is going to be more white, which is fine. It's usually good to have some whitish colors, not pure white, but white with a little bit of something else in it. Okay, so now that has come out. So I still have not cleaned this plate. We're going to go back and maybe do another shade of red. And we're going to keep going. Okay, this time we're going to get something a little bit darker. Let's go with the children's page. And so in my artwork, which I'll show you a couple examples of at the end, they're all made out of recycled painted papers. And again, I work in color groups. Actually, I have drawers full of different reds, different yellows, different greens, different blues, so that if I'm looking for something, I can search for it. Okay, this is more of a pinky red color. So now I have 3 sheets of this. Now we have to be careful. It's always a good idea to think about or even do a color wheel before you start. No matter how many years I've painted, every time I've done a color wheel, I've learned something. And in one class that I took, the teacher had us do 2 color wheels. One using the reddest red we had in our packet of materials, the yellowest yellow and the bluest blue, the purest of the colors. So we did the color wheel, and it came out to be pretty much what you would expect it to be. The orange, the green, the purple. But then what she had us do is she said, try it using metallics. Try using metallic red, a metallic yellow, a metallic blue, or try using turquoise and pale yellow and pink in place of the red, yellow, and blue. And so you get this whole other range of colors. It's a wonderful exercise. And if you go ahead then and add a gray paint, you get a tone. And if you add white paint, you get a shade. So when you're looking at this, you can automatically see, I have red on my palette right now and orange. If I put green on here right now, if I put the opposite of red on here right now, I will have a plate of mud. So I want to avoid that. So I want to avoid using the colors that are directly across from what I have. So I'm going to try a blue, knowing that the blue with the red will probably give me a shade of purple. So let's try this blue. Again, have not cleaned the plate. Okay, so just drizzle a little bit on. Notice I don't overload the paint. Otherwise it builds up the edges and it spills over, gets quite messy. All right, so now I've worked on a group of colors. So I have reds, and I have normally, I'm not going to sit and print for you because you have pretty much gotten the idea of how to do this. We're going to then go on to how we explore with this process. So now we have reds, purples. Okay, leave that to dry. By the way, acrylic dries very quickly, so within probably 10 minutes, these will be ready to go again. Now, I always have a blank sheet of printer paper by my side because I want to clean off this plate before I go to the next step, and this is how I'm going to clean it off. When you're done at the end, you can wash it off with a tiny bit of like Dawn and water, or you can use some precious hand sanitizer and wipe that off, but you might not want to do that these days. Or you can just keep blotting it and blotting it and blotting it. It will not make any difference. The only thing you never want to do is scratch into that jelly plate. So now I have this, which sort of looks messy right now, but if I keep printing on it, it'll be fine. Here's my roller. I want to clean my roller off. I'm going to roll that on as well. So now my jelly plate is clean, my roller's clean, and I have another paper to print on. Okay, so that's how we do the first round. And as I said, under normal circumstances, I would have different groups according to what I was making. So for this, I printed yellowy greens for the background, and then I became quite enamored of kiwis when I went to New Zealand, up to a painting class in New Zealand 2 years ago. So these are kiwis cut out of paper, 3 different prints on them. And so I did the surface, then I cut out the kiwis and so forth. So I knew when I was printing that I needed the yellowy greens, groups of oranges, blues, and purples, because that was kind of the color scheme I had in my head. Okay, so now, the second go round, we start to experiment. I just want to remind myself of something that's a New York artist, Robert Henri. And he once said, what we need is more is sense of wonder of life and less of the business of making a picture. And mixed media kind of allows you to do that. It allows you to just try it, do it. If it doesn't work, redo it, throw it away, do it again, use it for something else. It's just a lot of fun. And I'm a big proponent of that, having taught children for many years. If they weren't having fun, something was wrong. And so there was nothing more wonderful than to have them do something and go, wow, look at that. And that always happened when you mixed colors. So that sense of fun should be primary in what you're doing. Okay, so my next step, I'm going to go back to the first series of papers that I made, which for the minute I cannot find. I stacked them somewhere. Can you stop that for a minute? Where are my papers? Okay. So now I have the series that I originally printed, the yellows and greens. I want my next design to show up on this surface, so I'm not going to use yellow or green. Let's try this nice red here. For this purpose, maybe I will leave it solid, and I'm going to roll this out, fill the entire plate, get it fairly smooth, and then for the first experiment, or actually this is the second layer, I have bits of sponge. When I was in Florida a couple years ago, I bought a big bag of sponge, and they are wonderful. Not a kitchen sponge, but the little natural sponges. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to blot this on this surface. Now I'm kind of doing a pattern. You can do it haphazardly, but I'm trying to do it this way. And then of course, I have my extra sheet of paper to the side that I'm going to just clean that sponge off a little bit so the sponge doesn't get hard. Now I'm going to take one of the prints that I did before, and I'm going to put that on top and press that out. Okay, so now, I don't know how well you can see that. I'm trying to, oh, there you go. In the light, some of the green in the background is showing and some of the red. I'm going to let that dry. And now go to another sheet. And this time, instead of doing the sponge, I'm going to use torn strips of paper. And this is called masking. So I'm going to put another color in the red family on here and roll that out. Fill up that whole sheet, let some of that red mix in. And now I'm going to put these strips, which I might even tear a little thinner. And I'm going to kind of put them down there haphazardly, some close together, some further apart. And let's do one really tiny skinny one. Press them down. Make sure there are no air pockets under there. I'm going to take this sheet of green, place that on top, and press it through. And lift it. And this time I've gotten something that looks like this. So I have my original green, and now I have the orange. Okay, I'm going to let that one go by. Let's see what happens. Again, we experiment because sometimes you just don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to take these strips off very carefully. And by the way, I can actually save them for later use. Put those aside. And now I have some paint on here and some empty space. So let's try with what is left over. So we're doing a negative print of what we just did. Again, make sure you get to your edges, because sometimes if you do it really quickly and you lift it, you get nothing, or you get such a small amount of paint that it really is disappointing. So let's see if something, yes, something did happen, and something quite nice. Okay, a little more subtle, but something a little bit different. Okay, so at this point, my jelly plate is pretty clean. So now maybe I'll switch up my colors. And this time, I'm going to use a chopstick. Don't use anything that's pointed like a skewer. You'll damage the surface of the jelly plate. And once you damage it, it cannot be repaired. However, it does have another side, so that's good to know. And it also, you'll notice that I have a piece of plastic that's stuck onto it. When I'm done, I usually leave it on this plastic. When I'm done, I'll put a second sheet of plastic on it and put it in its shell container. I have to admit, the very first time I bought a gel plate, I didn't know that. And when I took it out, I said, oh, I don't need these two pieces of paper, and I just tossed them. And of course, the jelly plate got a little bit on the dry side and was not as workable. So don't throw the shell casing away, and don't throw those plastic sheets away. Very important. Okay, so now we're going to do some drawing. Little color switch up. Let's see. Let's try maybe a darker blue, maybe a purple. And the nice thing about the paint is that it dries so quickly, you can, you really can experiment and have fun with it, and you don't have to wait in between. I'm going to mix two colors this time. Roll my excess paint off on my sheet, my extra sheet, which is now beginning to look like this. Okay, we're going to roll this out. Now I have two colors. All right, nice, pretty smooth. Maybe a little bit too much paint that time. I'm just going to draw this time. I'll hold it up when I'm through so you can see what I've done. I'm just skimming along the top of the jelly plate. See what that looks like? Okay. And now I'm going to print. Getting out the bubbles. This paper is a little bit thicker, so you have to be a little more aware of pressing it down. Tissue paper, by the way, will not work with this because it's just too thin. Okay, so that's kind of a little more subtle than I want it to be, but some of that green shows through. I still have some ink on here. I'm not going to waste it. Let's try it on this yellow background and see what happens. I guess that's kind of the name, could almost be the name of this class. Let's see what happens. And pressing it out. Okay, that's a little more interesting. Again, let me get that to the light so you can see all the variations. Okay, so that was using the chopstick. However, there are other ways you can use the chopstick as well. Let's do a little bit of blue. Roll that out. Again, always trying 2 or 3 times to keep within the same color family, so I'm not getting a muddy plate. You can stop, clean it off, and start again, but once you get doing this, you kind of really get engrossed in it. You kind of get a little bit messy, so I prefer just to keep on going. So another way, okay, instead of doing that, is to kind of roll this stick across. Maybe turn it. Again, it's an experiment. So you never know what's going to happen. Okay, so I'm kind of getting these lines that are going up and down. I like the way this looks on here right now. Whether it's going to look like this when I print it, I don't know, but it's got some marks in it. Okay, so let's see what happens here. Okay, pretty nice. Okay, all different textures, all different patterns. There's a lot on here. Maybe what I'll do just to see what happens is take a plain sheet of white paper now. I like this pattern, I like the colors. Let's see how this all works. Okay. Okay. So you're wondering probably how in the world are these things going to be incorporated into a piece of artwork, but hang in there, they will. I happen to own, because my passion has become mixed media, I happen to own a lot of stencils. And there are a lot of sources, which Noel has, where you can get these. This is a stencil of letters. This is a stencil of different kinds of wheels. This is a stencil of a variety of circles. And these are just shapes. Now, stencils are fun and stencils are wonderful. They can be pretty pricey. They can run from $6 to $10 a piece. And if you're not using them the way I use them, you may not want to make that investment. So what I strongly suggest you do, especially if you're just starting out with this, is to make your own stencils. I have a sheet of heavyweight paper, which I bought at Staples, a pack of it. It's like a oak tag. And what I have done, and I'm putting this on an orange background so you can see the shapes. I am cutting a series. The knife has to be very sharp and you need to be very careful. And you need to leave spaces in between your cutouts. If you get too close, they will snap and you'll have a hole in the piece, which of course will not work. Now, once you have coated this 1 or 2 times with acrylic, it will not fall apart, it will not soak through, it will have a layer of like plastic on it. So you can actually make your own stencils. I don't suggest you cut little teeny tiny lines, but if you cut broad, bold shapes, leave spaces between them, this will work just fine. And I'm going to use this paper one now before I use the plastic ones. So my second sheet this time is turquoise. For right now, I'm going to move my jelly plate and I'm going to put my stencil on top. If you want to be super careful, you can tape it down. I'm not going to be super careful. So here I'm going to just put out on another piece of paper a little blob of paint. Make sure you shake the paint up well. These are makeup wedges. You can buy them by the bag in the supermarket, wherever. They're very nice to work with because they have that flat edge. So I kind of fill my sponge up by dabbing it. So and I don't want a lot of it, and I'm just going to hold this in place, and I'm going to tab down on it, just in each one. This paint is a little watery, so it's going to be transparent. I do want to talk to you about paints. Most of the craft paints that you will buy in Michael's, for example, they have a high content of water and a low content of paint. So they are thinner, more watery, less colorful. The more expensive the paint, the more pigment you will have in it, and the quality of the product will be, of course, better. However, the paints for beginners, this paint is fine. If you really get into working with mixed media and you want to assure your colors don't fade, your colors last, I use golden paints. They're probably 2 or 3 times the same price, but the quality of the colors is magnificent, and it lasts. I have people who have purchased some of my animal collages, and the colors they're perfect. They last. So now here's my stencil. So the paper stencil works. Now this has some acrylic on it. it won't fall apart, and it can be used over and over again. So that if you don't want to invest in stencils, this is a good way to start. Now the stenciling, usually people consider stenciling just you take the paper, you put it down, you put this over it, and you stencil the entire area, which I can do, which I will do, and then I'm going to show you an alternate method of addressing that kind of thing. Let's go with the same color right now. Again, this will last a while, and I have even cut them off with a pair of scissors because if they dry, they get hard and stiff, and basically they're not really useful at that point. You can wash them out, but really by the time you get done with the session, it'll be too hard to wash out. So I would just go with cutting it or just starting with a new one. Now, instead of just keeping on doing red here, let's see, what else could I put? Let's go to maybe some orange. I don't have any set up here right now, but I find that paper plates and styrofoam plates act as, great palettes for your paint, because again, you can throw away, or if you are concerned about recycling, if you quickly rinse off the styrofoam plate, you can reuse it. Okay, and let's do something a little different, and because I'm not putting these together on the same surface, I can use a third color that, if mixed in, will not give us a pretty color. But I'm not doing that, so now I'm doing this. So of course this is one stencil, 3 different colors. Maybe let some of that go up into there. Now each one of these is not a completed masterpiece. Look at these papers that you're printing as the material from which you're going to create your artwork. Okay, so there's the stencil, and here's the completed. So it's going from, you can't quite see, from red to orange to like a purpley blue. So that's one stencil on the surface. Okay, now another way to do that is to take a sheet of paper that you have already printed. And let me go with one that I've already made. Okay, and I'm going to use several stencils on this surface. So this circular one I'm going to put in the corner, and let's try a gold. Sometimes the metallics are spectacular, and sometimes they kind of fall flat. So you have to do a little bit of trial and error. Never hurts. So let's use a new sponge and see how this gold looks. Move this in about a third of the way over, and just carefully dabble the color on. It looks a little thin, but sometimes that works really well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 3 different stencils on this one painted background. So it does look a little light, but let's see what we've got. Okay, subtle, but you can see that, so like bubbles in that corner. Let's try a little of this one in another corner. What I'm trying to do is develop as many different kinds of textures and patterns as I can. Typically, when I make papers for my collages, I have at least 3 layers of paint on them, at least. So these thin, skimpy pieces of even printer paper become like thin sheets of plastic. They're very sturdy, and they hold up really, really well. Okay, so let's try. We're going to do a little bit of green, a light green on here. And to prevent it from seeping underneath the design, you just have to keep a downward, don't work from the side and push the paint, just dab the paint. And this will be our second stencil on this piece. Okay, so now we have that. And while we're still here, this is one of my favorite stencils. I have no idea why. It's numbers and letters, and I just love it. So I'm going to put that one here. And let's go back to, let's see. Let's go back to some red or orange for that. Okay. So this is plain. That's essentially what it amounts to. It's what will happen if I try this. And again, any one of these sheets that I've just done, if I'm not happy with, I can just print over again. And again, normally in my own work, I print my sheets 3 times. I like the paint to be a little on the heavier side. It makes the paper stronger. I think it enriches the color. The more layers of decoration you have on it, the better. So now I have a sheet of paper that's got 3 different things on it that I can choose from in a collage. Okay, so after stenciling, let's see. This is fun. Back to our jelly plate. And we are going to use, this time, we're going to use string on the brayer. This is a thin string, which has decided to, oh, there, the knot is gone. Okay, so the next sheet of paper I'm going to use is light. This light one that I made the first round. So now I probably want to do something a little dark this time. So let's do 2 shades of blue, a little squirt of turquoise, a little, stringy, a little squirt of a more pure blue. Roll those out over the sheet. Now I can see sometimes acrylic paint will get clumpy in the bottle and it will shed this interesting little skin, which you could actually print on. It might give you a neat paper, but right now I don't want to deal with that. So we'll just roll back over this. And I'm going to put the string, I don't know, this is probably 2 feet, maybe 3 feet in length. I'm going to put the string on the jelly plate and get the string to roll on the roller. You can see the pattern that it's making, or maybe not. Maybe I can hold that up a little closer. There are string-like marks on there. So now I'm going to take this brayer, sheet of paper, and I'm going to roll it on here. I want to make sure you see this. Okay, so now I have a linear design. That's too white. Can you see that? Yeah. And I'm going to do that again. And then I'm going to do that again. So now I have a linear pattern printed on that surface. I'm trying to get the right angle. There you go. Okay. But I still have these lines on my jelly plate. Let nothing go to waste. So now I'm going to leave those lines. In fact, maybe let me roll up this side just to make sure I do have enough lines. Take a lighter sheet of paper. Let's try it on red. And press that down. Okay. And now my red paper has got a lot of blue in it. I'm really sorry you can't see the rich colors, but you get the idea of the texture. Okay, so that's the string. Here's my handy sheet of paper that's been sitting and being used as a blotter. I'm going to blot all that off. We're done with the stencils. The kind of things you can decorate with. are just endless. You look in your kitchen, look in your garage, look in your workshop. There are things all over. An interesting thing to try is using a little plastic cup. Let's go back to, let's try this one. Here's the stencil one that I did. I'm going to just put a little bit of white on here. I forgot to take this. I'll just use another roller and roll out the white. I think my jelly plate's aging. It's got a little bump over here. Okay. And I'm going to take my, let me just shift that over because you don't need to see the jelly plate. You need to see this. Okay. This was the blue and green was the first print. The cutout stencil that I made is the second print. And now I'm just going to do this. I'm going to put the cup on the plate. And they're very subtle. Maybe I'll put a little more paint on there. There we go. So now each page is sort of getting its own personality. So now we have circles on top of that. So now we have 3 layers. But once again, I have the circles printed on here on the jelly plate surface, which I'm going to print on another surface. Okay, here's one that I did before with the sponge. And again, it's a let's see what happens. All right, we do have circles, and through that, although you can't see clearly, there is some green and some red showing. So that I like to have those different layers. It just keeps the interest going. Again, I still have a lot on here, so I'm just going to grab another sheet and print that color out. Paint doesn't go to waste. The paper doesn't go to waste, and this is fun. Kids can do this. And they can have a ball doing it. So that's the paper, that's the plastic cup. The other items that I have, and I mean, this can go on forever, but I just want to share 2 more items with you for printing and then talk a little bit about what you can do for your final product. These I discovered when I was teaching. These are printer plates. They're sold through companies like Dick Blick. They come in a packet. They're black plastic. They can be inked and printed, which I will show you. And then I have not been able to find these again, but the children's section of what used to be AC Moore was an interesting place, and I was buying foam for something. And I found this packet of foam, and they had different patterns on it, and they were made for kids to cut up and use in designs, but I inked them up and they became another source for printing. So let me show you each one of these and then the rollers, and then we'll talk about the final product. Okay. With these, you have to be a little bit careful because the design is quite subtle. It's not a deep cut. So if you put too much ink on it, it will fill in the spaces and you will just get a solid color. So I'm going to try to keep this light. And I'm actually going to ink up this plate. I have to admit, I very rarely wash any of this stuff at the end. I blot it clean and just leave it because it can be used again. Let's find something to use this on. Let's try this red one. Oops. Let's try this red one. I'm going to press it this way, and then I'm going to flip it, press it this way as well. Yes, it did work. I don't know if you can see it, but at the top of this page, there are tiny, tiny, tiny little blue dots. Tiny little blue dots. Okay, so that's the dots. This plate, I'm going to do the same way. I'm going to use the same color and ink this up. This probably needed a much darker background than what I'm going to use. You can see what that looks like. It really shows up. This on a dark sheet of paper would have been really dynamic, but I don't think I have any dark sheets of paper right now. Let's try this one. Okay, I'm going to take that, put it down, press it and flip it, and see if that works. So you have all these different materials to work with. String, stencils, printing plates, cups. So you have many, many different things that you can use. Oh, the ink was not dry enough. Unfortunately, unsuccessful, but I can show you part of it, this little part. Okay, that was my doing because I didn't let this sheet dry enough. So lesson well learned, let it dry well before you pull it, because this is what happens. It would have been very pretty, but we can try that again with a drier sheet. Okay, so the last thing, and these are getting harder and harder to find. These are rollers that have patterns on them. It's actually a carved roller. This one has dots and this one has circles. Let's see, maybe I'll darken this paint a little so it shows up a little bit better for you. I have looked for them again and again, but I couldn't find them. I did find some that Martha Stewart had made, and they were in A.C. Moore, but they were about this wide. They were for actually rolling designs on your wall. So they were a little too big, and I don't think she makes them anymore. Again, very subtle change of color on top of there, and these dots. Let's try and find something we can print. Oh, let's try this one. This one's really nice, but let's just see how some dots look on top of this. Okay, you can see it better on the orange. I'm trying to show you. Okay, down in here. It's a very subtle light dot on top of that surface. So now I have all these papers. What in the world am I going to do with them? Well, I'm going to show you some things that I have worked on. I like to tear most of my paper when I work. I like the rougher edges. And when you tear paper, you need to be aware of tearing it in two different directions. If you tear it toward you, you get a cleaner edge. If you tear it away from you, you get more white along the edge. And sometimes that looks good in something, and sometimes it doesn't. It's just something that you need to know. Another important thing about paper is that paper has a grain. And if you try to tear it a certain way, it won't work. This paper, I can tear it very easily, I hope, in this direction. But if I try to tear it this way, it's a clump. Again, something to note if you're creating water and you want more even lines or lines in the sky. So that's a very important thing to know about paper. So let me show you some of the things that I have made with my painted papers. This is a peacock made with all different painted papers. It's 12 by 12. When I'm done, I generally, again, I said I work on canvas board. I let my work dry for at least 3 days, and then I spray it with 3 layers of varnish made by Golden, and I spray it once, let it dry for 12 hours or more, again, and then again. So this is virtually indestructible. I could take a sponge with it and I could wash it. There's no glass needed on it, no covering needed on it. It's very sturdy. So that's a peacock. Emperor penguin. Lots of different shades of white and blue in the background. And then we have, this is an abstract. It was made with strips of paper. You can see the strips going up and down, sort of in a jagged, that kind of composition is called a bridge, going across the paper. And something very timely, the pumpkin. Again, so you can say I tore up light green, tore up darker green, tore up a more whitish green. There are many shades of orange in the pumpkin, many shades of blue color in the background, torn small pieces of paper, and I use gel medium. Gel medium with a thick brush, and the application goes, you put the glue down on the canvas, you put your piece of paper down, you put glue back on the top. So you're sealing the paper between two layers of glue. If you don't put glue down on your canvas first, your paper is going to slide around. So you want that to adhere. Put your paper where you want it. If you don't like where it is, you can lift it, shift it over, and then you put the glue back on it again, so it's encased in the two layers. So these are just explorations. They're fun to do. You can make cards out of them. I had done a series of birds. This is a bird that I cut out of, I'm just going to hold it against this so you can see it better, out of a pattern of paper, and glued it on a background with a simple little twig and a few little leaves, and it was a charming little piece of work. Again, possibilities are endless. You can do portraits, which are difficult. I have done many animals. And I've done flowers, which flowers I think are harder than animals, but fun to do. I would work in a fairly smallish surface. I wouldn't start out with anything, 20 by 36. This size, this is a 12 by 12 size, 8 by 10. For starting out, I think that's a good way to go. You have more control over your space. So I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope you enjoy your jelly plate. Maybe you'll even come up with other things to use. People have used lace to print with. They've used the bags from oranges, or burlap. Again, possibilities are endless. In closing, I'd like to draw your attention to 3 artists that I think you should definitely look up. One is Julie Balzer. She's out of Massachusetts. She's an incredibly creative individual. Seth Apter is a well-known collagist in the New York area, and Elizabeth St. Hilaire. She's the torn paper queen. She does workshops all over the world actually right now, and I have taken classes with all of these people. They're pretty amazing. If you have any questions, suggestions, or ideas, I would be very happy to communicate with you, and you can get me, you can reach me at tworonczuk@yahoo.com. It's WORONCZUK. So I hope you have fun, enjoy, and please stay in touch. Bye now.